This year, 350,000 Americans will die from cancer. 1 out of 4 of us will develop cancer in our lifetime. That's over 50 million people in the United States alone. The purpose of this presentation is to show that this great human tragedy can be stopped now entirely on the basis of existing scientific knowledge. We'll explore the theory that cancer, like scurvy or pellagra, is a deficiency disease, aggravated by the lack of an essential food compound in modern man's diet, and that its ultimate control is to be found simply in restoring this substance to our daily intake. We are not in the business of promoting vitamins, food supplements, or products of any kind. We are not prescribing any course of treatment. We endorse nothing except freedom of choice. We have nothing to sell but facts. What you are about to hear does not carry the approval of organized medicine. The Food and Drug Administration, the American Cancer Society, and the American Medical Association have labeled it fraud and quackery. The average physician, however, is less dogmatic. He's more apt to say, let's give it a try and then pass judgment. Consequently, an increasing number of doctors all over the world now are testing and proving in their own clinics that the vitamin concept of cancer is true. With billions of dollars spent each year on research, with other billions taken in from the cancer-related sale of drugs, and with vote-hungry politicians promising ever-increasing government programs, we find that today there are more people making a living from cancer than are dying from it. If the riddle were to be solved by a simple vitamin, this gigantic commercial and political industry could be wiped out overnight. The result is that the science of cancer therapy isn't nearly as complicated as the politics of cancer therapy. In the past, the FDA and other agencies of government have used every means at their disposal to prevent this story from being told. They've arrested citizens for holding public meetings to tell others of their convictions on this subject. They've confiscated films and books. They even now are prosecuting doctors who apply these theories in an effort to save the lives of their own patients. With this background in mind, it may appear to be the height of folly to proceed with this presentation. But, ladies and gentlemen, if the story that follows is true, as we firmly are convinced it is, then in the name of humanity, someone simply has to stand up against the bureaucracy. And we are determined to do it. The history of science is the history of struggle against entrenched error. Many of the world's greatest discoveries initially were rejected by the scientific community, and those who pioneered those discoveries often were ridiculed and condemned as quacks and charlatans. Columbus was bitterly attacked for believing the earth was round. Bruno was burned at the stake for claiming the earth was not the center of the universe. Galileo was imprisoned for teaching that the earth moved around the sun. Even the Wright brothers were ridiculed and condemned for claiming that a machine could fly above the earth. In the field of medicine, Andreas Vesalius was denounced as an impostor and heretic because of his discoveries in the field of human anatomy. William Harvey was disgraced as a physician for believing that blood was pumped by the heart and actually moved around the body through arteries. And Ignaz Semmelweis was fired from his hospital post for requiring his maternity staff to wash their hands. Centuries ago, it wasn't unusual for entire naval expeditions to be wiped out by scurvy. Between 1600 and 1800, the casualty list of the British Navy alone was over 1 million sailors. Medical experts of the time were baffled as they searched in vain for some kind of a strange bacterium, virus, or toxin that supposedly lurked in the dark holds of ships. And yet, for hundreds of years, the cure was already known and written in the record. In the winter of 1535, when the French explorer Jacques Cartier found his ships frozen in the ice off the St. Lawrence River, scurvy began to take its deadly toll. Out of a crew of 110, 25 already had died, and most of the others were so ill they weren't expected to recover. And then a friendly Indian showed them the simple remedy. tree bark, and needles from the white pine, both rich in ascorbic acid or vitamin C, were stirred into a drink which produced immediate improvement and swift recovery. Upon returning to Europe, Cartier reported this incident to the medical authorities, but they were amused by such witch doctor cures of ignorant savages, and they did nothing to follow it up. Yes, the cure for scurvy was known, but because of scientific arrogance, it took over 200 years and cost hundreds of thousands of lives before the medical experts began to accept and apply this knowledge. Finally, in 1747, John Lind, a young surgeon's mate in the British Navy, discovered that oranges and lemons produced relief from scurvy, and recommended that the Royal Navy include citrus fruits in the stores of all its ships. And yet, it still took 48 more years before his recommendation was put into effect. The 20th century has proven to be no exception to this pattern. Only a generation ago, large portions of the American Southeast were decimated by the dread disease of pellagra, which was thought to be contagious and probably caused by an as yet undiscovered virus. As far back as 1914, Dr. Joseph Goldberger had proven that this condition was related to diet, and later showed that it could be prevented simply by eating liver or yeast. But it wasn't until the 1940s, almost 30 years later, that the medical world fully accepted pellagra as a vitamin B deficiency. By 1952, Dr. Ernst T. Krebs, Jr., a biochemist in San Francisco, had advanced the theory that cancer, like scurvy or pellagra, is not caused by some kind of mysterious bacterium, virus, or toxin, but is merely a deficiency disease aggravated by the lack of an essential food compound in modern man's diet. He identified this compound as part of the nitriliside family, which occurs abundantly in nature in over 1,200 edible plants and found virtually in every part of the world. It's particularly prevalent in the seeds of fruits, but also is contained in grasses, maize, sorghum, millet, cassava, linseed, bitter almonds, and many other foods that generally have been deleted from the menus of modern civilization. A chronic disease is one which usually doesn't pass away of its own accord. A metabolic disease is one which arises within the body and isn't transmittable to another person. Cancer, therefore, is defined as a chronic metabolic disease. Dr. Krebs has pointed out that in the entire history of medical science, there hasn't been one chronic metabolic disease that was ever cured and prevented by drugs or mechanical manipulation of the body. In every case, the ultimate solution was found only in factors relating to adequate nutrition, and he thinks that this is an important clue as to where to concentrate our scientific curiosity in the search for a better understanding of cancer. But there are other clues as well. Before looking at the more technical aspects of Dr. Krebs' theory, it's well that we examine some of them. For example, domesticated pets often seek out certain grasses to eat, even though they're adequately filled by other foods. This is particularly likely to happen if the animals are not well. It's interesting to note that the grasses selected by instinct are Johnson grass, Tunis grass, Sudan grass, and others that are especially rich in nitrilicides, or vitamin B17. Monkeys and other primates at the zoo, when given a fresh peach or apricot, will carefully pull away the sweet fleshy part, crack open the hard pit, and devour the small seed that remains. Instinct compels them to do this, even though they've never seen that kind of fruit before. These seeds are one of the most concentrated sources of nitrilicides to be found anywhere in nature. Wild bears are great consumers of nitrilicides in their natural diet. Not only do they seek out berries that are rich in this substance, but when they kill small grazing animals for their own food, instinctively they pass over the muscle portions and consume first the viscera and rumen, which are filled with nitrilicide grasses. In captivity, animals seldom are allowed to eat all the foods of their instinctive choice. In the San Diego Zoo, for example,